Good morning, everyone. How are we all doing? Thank you for coming to an 8:30 wellness panel. I can tell you all already know everything there is by just showing up at this hour. My name is Courtney Barnes. I am a partner at Feldman Legal Advisors. We are a cannabis-focused and psychedelics-focused business law firm based in New York. I am delighted to be here today with a host of amazing panelists to talk about wellness trends and the transition from synthetic to natural medicines. As someone who was prescribed to a prescription medicine that I took every day for 15 years and finally made that break about 2 years ago, this is a topic very, very dear to my heart. And I wanted to just start off with giving a few facts on sort of the state of the pharmaceutical industry. Over 131 million people in the United States, that's over 66% of the population, are currently prescribed to a prescription medication. Of those prescription medications available on the market, 99% of them have, or 69% of them have 10 to 100 side effects. There is only 9% of drugs that have less than 10 listed side effects. So we are having an incredibly important conversation about the developing options that are out there for people to make that transition to more natural-based products. I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll sort of dive right into their expertise.
Hi, my name is Dustin Robinson. I'm the founder of Eater Investments, which is a venture capital fund that invests in alternative therapies for mental and behavioral health. Also the founder of Lumalex Law, which is a law firm that represents companies in emerging industries like cannabis and psychedelics. Also the founder of Mr. Cannabis Law, which is a consulting firm for the cannabis industry. And then I think maybe relevant to this conference, I'm also the founder of Infinite Wellness, which it was an applicant in the April 2023 round here in Florida for an MMTC license, hoping they'll be announcing the winners here in Florida in the next 30 days. So that's a vertically integrated marijuana license with no cap on locations.
Oh, it's on, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name's Dr. Elizabeth Colley. So I'm with Bluestem API Inc. We are a psychedelic-based company focused on botanical psilocybin, focused on production as well as service delivery. And we have innovative and integrated verticals across R&D, production, clinics and retreats, as well as digital mental health solutions, not just for consumers, but also for practitioners. And really, we're developing these broad-based solutions to not just target illness, which we know is an issue, but also to help people thrive, both in their relationships and their community. So I'm the Chief Scientific Officer with Bluestem. I oversee our diverse research portfolio. I'm also a professor at Dalhousie University and the University of Ottawa. My early clinical research was focused on neuroscience and neuroimaging, giving illicit substances to humans at McGill University and the Montreal Neurological Institute. I've also served on a number of boards, but really my passion is focused on bringing mental health solutions to the public that are based on best practices and the most current research.
Hello, it is on, okay. My name is Claire Stanici. I'm the CEO of Lofos Pharmaceuticals. We're a Canadian bioscience company that's focused in peyote cultivation and research. We cultivate peyote in Canada under an exemption to the Controlled Substances Act, and we were recently awarded a controlled substance dealer's license by Health Canada, which allows us to produce other psychedelic molecules, including mescaline, psilocybin, for other researchers or licensed producers, as well as patients in the SAP program. We were also recently listed on the CSE. So we've had a fantastic build-up this year. My background is studied cell and molecular biology. I worked in industrial biotechnology in San Francisco. I really founded Lofos with that framework in mind of being able to apply the pharmaceutical safety standards to a natural plant to increase the safety around it. And so I'm excited to be here today, and it's nice to meet you all.
Good morning. Does that work? Does it work now? Yes. No? We'll swap. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out so early. My name is Hadass Cowan-Dewey. I am the COO of Capsoil Technologies and the founder of It's All About Choices. We have a powder conversion technology, and then we also have an edibles brand in California. Excited to be here with you all and kind of talk about the future of plant wellness, and excited for Courtney to kick us off.
Thanks, everyone. As you can see, we have an impressive group of panelists spanning from science to investment to product development and more. So let's jump in with Elizabeth. With your background in neuroscience, could you briefly explain, to the audience, what does it mean when we say natural versus synthetic?
Yeah, absolutely. So synthetic is really lab-based. It's what's derived in the lab, not necessarily from any pure plant-based. And then plant is what is grown and what actually comes from, what we grow in terms of either cannabis or mushrooms. So speaking from a psilocybin perspective, what we know from cannabis, what we're learning with psilocybin, is that psilocybin-based mushrooms have those constituent bioalkaloids that lead to what we commonly refer to as the entourage effect. So these are your baeocysteines, aerogenesins, for example. Additionally, botanical psilocybin has biocarbolines, which are MAOIs, which we know increase bioavailability, and can also decrease or increase the effect that you're seeing because it stops the degradation in the body. And so we're learning that these additional compounds are actually contributing to some of the positive effects that we're seeing. So for example, just 2 months ago, we saw a paper come out in Molecular Psychiatry that actually said that it was botanical psilocybin that had a more potent and more prolonged effect on neurogenesis compared to its synthetic analog. So this is extremely important in terms of the fact that we know when it comes to psilocybin or psychedelics, it's actually neuroplasticity that's leading to some of those really positive effects. And so one of the issues that we're facing is that it's actually, regulators see these as impurities as opposed to focusing on the science, saying that they're actually benefiting and all of the positive effects coming from them. So that's some of the difference between a synthetic versus plant-based.
I think that's so important because, the pharmaceutical industry generally, and, not knocking that part of the access pathway at all, is that synthetic is identical and exactly the same as the psilocybin that you're getting naturally because it's easier to duplicate and manufacture. That is really what we're seeing from the pharmaceutical industry, but it's wonderful to have people here that are working in natural drug development because we're just touching the tip of the iceberg onto the potential benefits of what comes from the earth. So thank you, I really appreciate that. And Claire, as CEO of Lofos, how do you see the role of natural medicines evolving the broader landscape of pharmaceuticals and wellness solutions?
I think that we're seeing a rapid evolution and just a general desire in the public to have a more full spectrum experience. You mentioned the entourage effect, and I think that that's such an important aspect when we think about the medicines that we're taking is that, traditional pharmaceuticals have focused in on one single molecule, and I think we've seen distinctly that there's instances where that full spectrum experience is more enjoyable and more therapeutic for the patient. And I think peyote actually is very interesting when you compare it to cannabis. It's one of the more unique psychedelics in that cannabis has this full spectrum cannabinoid profile. And peyote is the only psychedelic that has over, as we know of, 50 alkaloids. And all of those alkaloids are therapeutic. So if you were to just take it down to the mescaline only, and it's, you're missing out on a full spectrum experience. And so I really think that natural medicines are going to continue to evolve. I hope to see more pharmaceutical applications that are including a more full spectrum experience. I think that that's the next nut to crack in terms of clinical trials, is how do we execute a clinical trial with more of a full spectrum profile. And so I really think that natural medicines in the cannabis world and the psychedelics world are really pushing kind of on the regulators to explore more of those options. And it's an exciting thing to see.
That's awesome. So Hadass, you're in a little bit of a different industry, but still plant-based, fast-acting sort of consumer products. What innovations in technology do you believe are going to be crucial for consumers to really make the switch from synthetic to natural wellness solutions?
Yeah, I think. Hello. I think, just like you said, fast acting. So we're seeing this shift in the market, shift in customers, people wanting instant gratification. We're seeing people who are using this as medicine at the end of the day, and they want that relief. They want to make sure that they're getting that satisfaction. And then leaning into the full spectrum and really the purity of the plant. We want to make sure we're using technologies and we're using processes that are organic, that are solventless, so we're not harming the full genetic portfolio, whether that is of cannabis or plant medicine, and we're getting the full benefits of the plant. So the ability to kind of have this fast-acting solution and also keep the full genetic portfolio so we can fully enjoy the benefits of plant medicine.
And could you just give us a brief overview of what kind of products are you all making? Actually, I'd like to hear that from all three of you before we jump into the regulatory and investment side. Tell us each about sort of what's the end goal product portfolio, and what are the products you're selling right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Capsule Technologies, we have a patented technology that converts oil into a nanometric powder. We have a fully solventless organic process. It is a physical process that does not harm the genetic portfolio of the oil. So as we all know, there is plenty of terpenes and minor cannabinoids that are helpful and impactful when it comes to solutions, and we're able to kind of conserve that full portfolio of the oil. With It's All About Choices, we do anything that is not a gummy. So there's a lot of gummies on the market, and they're wonderful, but we're kind of leaning into this new generation of consumers that are saying, hey, we want newer product, we want things that are kind of everyday usage. So we do anything from salad dressings to popsicles, drink mixes, ice cubes, things that you're already using in your everyday consumption, and leaning into that and kind of incorporating it into your schedule.
And what about each of you? I know peyote and psilocybin are some of the focuses, but do you have a particular indication you all are working towards finding a solution for, or is it capsule-based? Just give us a little bit of an overview. What does natural medicine look like for your companies?
Yes. So for us, the exemption to the Controlled Substance Act is very specific in fresh or dried preparation. And so we're very excited we're gearing up to our first harvest later this year, where we'll offer fresh and dried peyote. We also, very importantly, cultivate under good agricultural collection practices, and we test according to the pharmacopoeia for herbal medicines. And so that's something that I'm very excited to be able to push forward and for our first product offerings. And then, as we move forward, Lofos as a company is very focused in furthering the research around mescaline. And so our research lab, that's really the next steps, is kind of furthering that goal. So I would invite everyone to stay tuned for that.
So exciting. I'm just so impressed. So I'll just speak to one of the things that we're looking in. So we've actually submitted a US patent for a novel formulation because, just like anything, psilocybin is not without some side effects. And so we're looking to target that with other plant-based extracts to have the best, most fruitful experience when you do take psilocybin.
Awesome. I am impressed. So Dustin, you are a lawyer, an investor, a business leader. You've had your eye on sort of everything that's been happening in the psychedelics as well as cannabis space for the past several years now. What do you think are the best opportunities from an investment perspective for plant medicine? And then we'll kind of dial that question in a bit because I know that's a big one.
Yeah, one of the areas we're very interested in right now, we've invested in 2 companies that are using AI to kind of look at all natural medicines. There's thousands of plant medicines out there, and basically use those to be inspired to create new synthetic psychedelic molecules or cannabinoid-based molecules. So right now with psychedelics, for example, they all hit different receptors, mainly on the 5-HT2A receptor area. But if you're trying to do it for a therapeutic perspective, you may want to hit certain receptors and not other receptors. So being able to look at the natural plant medicines, but actually dial it and fine tune it to hit the receptors that you want to hit. For example, they talked about quicker onset or a longer duration. So for example, 5-MeO DMT is a very short-acting psychedelic. We have one company that's trying to speed up the onset, but actually increase the duration. So rather than having like a 15 to 20 minute trip, it'll be like a 60-minute trip. And the opposite is true as well with psilocybin. Psilocybin is anywhere from 4 to 8 hour duration. We have companies that are trying to shorten that duration to about 1 hour. So when you think about things in like the therapeutic context, it's looking like people would prefer to kind of be in a clinic for about 1 hour going through that experience as opposed to 15 minutes or 6 hours. Another area that we're really interested in is really looking at biomarkers and personalized medicine. I think we've all kind of heard the stories of one particular strain of cannabis. One person might get anxiety from it. Another, it might actually relieve their anxiety. So kind of looking at genetics, looking at biologics, and kind of understanding that better so that we could test people and really understand what people will react a certain way with certain medicines. And I also think with now psychedelics really moving through clinical trials, MDMA will likely be approved in August of this year, psilocybin soon after, DMT, 5-MeO DMT. The reality is that all people react differently to different psychedelic medicines. So being able to look at the biomarkers and kind of doing a more personalized medicine approach to figure out which of those medicines is best for a particular individual.
Okay. So lots going on in the investment space, but also a lot of different hurdles. Do you see, from a regulatory standpoint, those, areas of interest changing over the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years? Do you think we're going to stay focused on sort of this short-acting, impactful, efficient psychedelic experience? Do you think that's going to change? And sort of, where do you see yourself in 10 years from an investment standpoint?
I think from a regulatory perspective, one of the ways I differentiate cannabis from psychedelics is that I think in the end, when all the dust settles, I think cannabis is more of a CPG product. I think there'll be like a 10% sliver of the market that is more pharmaceutical based, but I think 90% of it will be more CPG focused. On the psychedelic side, I see it as the opposite. I think the way the psychedelic industry is progressing, I think it's going to be about 90% more pharmaceutical. There'll be a 10% sliver that's kind of like what's happening out in Colorado and Oregon, where it's non-medical. And so on the cannabis side, I think, number one, we have the DEA at a federal level that will likely reschedule marijuana in the next 12 months. And then states like Florida, looks like we're probably going to pass recreational on the November ballot. We'll see what happens, but it's a red state, so I think that's a really big deal for the industry as a whole. And I think we're just going to see more and more states over the next 5 years. I think nearly every state will probably pass some form of legalization for marijuana. Then on the psychedelic side, it's kind of a cleaner regulatory approach that's being taken, being that they're going through FDA clinical trials. So MDMA will likely be approved in August of 2024, probably commercialized in 2025. What's probably going to happen is you're also going to see states specifically regulate psychedelic therapy. That's what we see in the telehealth space. So if you're using telehealth for controlled substances, you have federal law, you have the Ryan-Haidt Act, but you also have specific state laws. I think we're going to see something very similar when it comes to psychedelic therapy. You'll have FDA-approved drugs, but you're also going to have to comply with state laws. And then I think we're going to see more states. We have Oregon and Colorado that are leading the way as far as kind of a state-authorized framework for psychedelics. We're going to see more states do that. We're seeing a lot of different frameworks shape out. Some states are just doing like a research-based approach where it's not as broad as Colorado or Oregon. But they're taking kind of more of just research, let's understand these compounds better approach and appropriating capital towards that research. So from an investment perspective, I'm very interested in the Colorado and Oregon type framework, but quite frankly, I don't see a real economic upside on that. So we're more focused, on, at least with the psychedelics, on the pharmaceutical framework, and that's how we see this industry developing from an investment and economic perspective.
That's all great points. And actually, just to give everyone sort of a little bit of a primer on psychedelics in the United States, or sort of how plant medicine is being referred to more commonly these days, is just like cannabis, all psychedelics, your classical psychedelic compounds, psilocybin, DMT, LSD, mescaline, ibogaine, they are all currently classified, along with cannabis and heroin, as Schedule I controlled substances under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. So this means that the federal government believes that these compounds have a high potential for abuse, no accepted use and treatment in the United States, and a lack of accepted safety for use under medical supervision. Psychedelics are subject to the same barriers to research in the United States as cannabis currently is, and there's no Cole memorandum for psychedelic compounds. However, we're seeing, similar to cannabis, that it's going through the state movement, as you touched on. We now have Colorado and Oregon that have created regulated licensing systems. So you could get a state license to operate a healing center where adults 21 years of age and older can go to these service centers and have a psilocybin journey or a psychedelic experience under the supervision of a licensed facilitator. So it's a different business model than cannabis. You're not allowed to take the product home with you. You're not going to have 500 customers come through your door in a day. But the healing potential is just as profound. It can save lives. We're really making an impact, and we're starting to see that same grassroots movement. There's 28 cities that have decriminalized psychedelic compounds, and 2 states that have created regulatory access models. I think 28 states already have introduced some form of legislation that includes the term psychedelics this session, and there's about 14 different kinds of legislation that have been passed, as you mentioned, research bills, funding for research, the creation of task force, et cetera. Now you guys also, some of us operate in Canada. Do one of you want to sort of provide an overview of what psychedelics or natural medicine law looks like for psychedelics and cannabis? And
Yeah, I mean, to me, I find it very fascinating, being born in Georgia and now living in Toronto, the differences and the kind of the regulatory advancements that have been made to allow these things to happen. So when you look at what we're focused on with peyote, this is an exemption that's always existed, but was never really utilized. And I think it's very important, the work that we're doing in particular, to not only save the plant, But my hope is to one day be able to, I mean, because if you look at the regulatory landscape in the United States, peyote is traditionally a sacrament for the Native American church. It's only found in one very small part of Texas and it has a reproduction cycle of 13 to 30 years in the wild. So you're looking at something that has a strong potential of going extinct in our lifetime. And it's very important that you source peyote in a very ethical way and you leave it for its sacrament for the Native American church. And so my hope is that, so our board is 50% indigenous, and I really hope that our indoor cultivation methods will one day be able to offset the demand in the United States through that avenue. But you also see a global regulatory landscape that's evolving, and that regulators are becoming more and more accepting of plant medicine and traditional medicines, and they're looking at it with a common sense eye and less of the risk adverse eye. And so, peyote in particular is legal. I believe it's in 9 countries. It has some legality or full legality. And recently we've seen Health Canada actually add peyote to the natural health product ingredient database, giving it a very legitimate path forward in natural health product formulations. And so my hope is that other regulators are going to see this path forward in traditional medicine, and that it's not so scary, and that we remove it from Schedule 1 into a more reasonable, I mean, even if it was Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, it would just allow researchers to have so much more room to explore and to help support natural medicines in the United States. So that's my sincere hope, and I hope that we play a part in helping, further that mission.
Yeah, there's definitely like an international movement right now on the psychedelic side. We've invested in several companies in Canada. They have dealer's licenses that allow you to basically produce some of these psychedelic APIs, which is what Lofos is doing there. And then even the special access program in Canada has been a huge deal as well, getting access to veterans and other people suffering. So Canada has been a true leader. With Canada, though, the market is much smaller than it is in US, right? So it's good that we have places like Canada where we're kind of experimenting and doing some of the research, but kind of the United States is the gold standard just because we have such a big market, and because the FDA, their regulations are kind of the gold standard from a regulatory perspective. But we're also seeing Australia. They've made huge strides on the regulatory front. And then you're seeing all sorts of different countries. We actually sponsor some of the research out of Imperial College of London. The UK is actually a little bit behind the US, but there's several groups that are advocating out there and doing incredible work. So I really think our fund, we look at the investment opportunity really from an international perspective. We think different parts of the value chain in different countries are more valuable. For example, in Canada, we think on the production side, it's more interesting just because there's so much flexibility. But if we're looking on really the drug development side of it, we prefer the US just because it's such a bigger market. But we've also invested in a retreat in Jamaica. So that's kind of a different side of the psychedelic industry where it's really more about wellness. And they're delivering, it's a 5-day psilocybin retreat. So there's lots of different opportunities, but those opportunities really arise by understanding what the regulatory framework is in each of those countries.
And Claire, so I wanted to touch on, so what's your vision for the future of regulation in Canada, as well as Elizabeth, and then your experience in California? And the timer has jumped from 7 minutes to 2 minutes to 12 minutes here, so we're gonna do one more round of questions and then we'll wrap it up.
I'll be quick. I mean, I really just see the future being bright in terms of just understanding. We're seeing fantastic research come from MAPS. It just makes me so excited. I hope that more clinical trials are able to continue forward and that the funding is there to support it. I think that this industry, as well as the cannabis industry, have done a lot to help patients that are terminally ill, cancer, just trauma. We look at the global traumatic events that we've been through. I think that there's real sources of healing in both industries, and so I really just think that that's going to continue. I see a lot of optimism.
Yeah, I'm also very excited about the direction that we're taking, but I think one thing that we need to address, and it's something that we are focused on and was actually our first Health Canada research approval, is shelf life. Because I think one of the reasons that there hasn't been wide uptake in terms of cannabis as a prescribed medicine, and one of the things that might be a shortcoming going forward, is that there is no expiration date. And so it's something that we need to address, because physicians don't feel comfortable prescribing something when they're not sure about the efficacy, the potency, how long it lasts. And that's something that we need to acknowledge and address. So we at Bluestem are going back to basics and looking at encapsulation and different environmental conditions, how it should be packaged to establish that shelf life, and hopefully make physicians and practitioners more comfortable actually prescribing this as a medicine.
And what about you, Hadass? What's your vision for the future?
I really think that this post-pandemic wave has brought over a wave of wellness awareness, and people are definitely leaning and are piqued on the interest. And kind of like Claire said, there's no way for us to really grow within that without the clinical research, without kind of the backing for people to understand what it's about, what is the abilities are behind it, and really continuing with the funding of clinical research in order to be able to really show the world and show everyone else what are the capabilities of plant medicine.
This has been wonderful, and I am actually going to take the initiative, and we're going to do one more round. As an entrepreneur in this space, what are 2 pieces of advice you would give, and we'll have everyone answer this question, to someone who wanted to enter the natural medicine sphere? You know, what has been so important to you? It can be one word, it can be a sentence, and then we'll close it off.
I think it really starts with understanding the regulatory framework of whatever area you wanna work in. We're in a the plant medicine space is obviously very highly regulated. So I think regardless of whatever category or whatever area, whatever part of the value chain you want to operate at, I think it's very important to really understand the regulatory aspects, because those regulatory aspects, not only they're obstacles in a way, but they're also opportunities. If you know the regulations well enough and you know how to navigate them, those regulations then become opportunities, not just obstacles.
Yes, I would say I agree, understand the space, but I think also then find your niche and be a little bold.
I completely agree, and would just third the fact that the regulatory knowledge is of the utmost importance in our industries, in both cannabis and psychedelics. To truly be able to navigate your way and innovate, you really need to understand where you can go and how far you can go. And then as well as just, minding your burn rate. If you're not fiscally responsible, anything can happen right now, and you need to have your eye on the revenue prize, so to say, and keeping your funds alive. And I think that that's very important in this day and age in 2024.
And kind of going off of all of what you guys are saying, also remember to keep authentic to what this industry is about and what you are passionate about. I mean, I think that a lot of people have come in and out of these industries, coming in with a mindset that they're going to change the industry or look at it a different way, and it's a very small but big industry, and coming in and making sure you know what you're passionate about and it'll translate through your actions.
Well, thank you all very much for your time. This has been a wonderful panel, and thanks for coming out so early.